Welcome to the Alphagenix Podcast, where every week we talk to incredible guests from around the world of biohacking, well-being, men's health, and more. Here's your host, co-founder of Alphagenix, Ross Tompkins.
Well, I'm delighted to welcome today's guest, Nicki Williams, founder of Happy Hormones for Life. Welcome, Nikki. We've known each other for quite a while, and obviously the link I'm sure we'll talk about during the episode. But welcome to Alphagenix Podcast. Who is Nicki Williams, and how did Happy Hormones for Life come about?
Hi, Ross. Thanks so much for inviting me. And I'm here to talk about women's hormones, which is the flip side of what you do. So I'm really delighted to be here. So I used to work in corporate, various jobs. And then in my early 40s, I had two young children and a very busy job running teams and all of that stuff. And I just found that every day was just exhausting for me. It was like walking through treacle. I was stressed. I had a lot on my plate, juggling everything. I was really moody, like mood swings and quite a lot of low mood. And I had brain fog, couldn't think about, couldn't remember things at work, and it was really affecting my performance. And I started to put weight on around my middle, which I normally knew how to get rid of, but the normal things weren't working. And I was really moody around my children, which was the worst thing for me, because I did not want to be that grumpy mum. I wanted to be fun mum, but that wasn't happening at all. And I didn't know what was wrong with me, because back then, and this is, I'm 56 now, so this was back when I was about 14 odd years ago. None of this information that's around now was around, so I had no idea. Now, I was really lucky that I had my dad in my life, but I didn't really know what he did, and I'll come to him in a minute. But so I went to my usual doctor, rattled off my symptoms in the 8 minutes or 10 minutes that we get, and he just looked at me and went, well, I'm just going to give you this. And he gave me a prescription, and it said Prozac on it, because I was fairly tearful. And I looked at it, I thought, oh, that's for depression, isn't it? And he goes, yeah, that's what I'm going to recommend. And I said, well, I'm not depressed. And I kind of knew instinctively I wasn't depressed. I've not had that in my family. I've never had it before. It didn't feel like that to me, but I didn't know what it was. So anyway, I rang up my dad. I said, Dad, my doctor wants to put me on these antidepressants. What do you think? And he said, Nick, it will be your hormones. And I went, what do you mean? He said, you're in perimenopause. And I said, I mean, what? That word just didn't exist back then. And now everyone knows, hopefully most people know what that is. But I had no idea. All I heard was the word menopause. And I said, surely that happens when you're old. I'm young. And what's going on? And what are you talking about? And he then said, right, okay, I know you're not going to believe me, so let's get you tested. And we did a whole series of tests that I didn't even know were available. I didn't know what any of these hormones were or did or anything. I had no education on it at all. And it was a revelation, I have to say, looking at my results. And yes, my hormones were all over the place. There was low, high, all in the wrong places. And first of all, it was a relief to know that it wasn't depression, or it wasn't something that I'm just making up. And secondly, it was just fascinating to me that, oh my goodness, look at this stuff going on inside, and why is it changing? Because he gave me the education that I never got at school or from anybody growing up. And I could see that, all my friends were suffering as well. They'd hit 40, and it's for a woman hitting 40, it's kind of like, can be a bit like being hit by a train if you don't know what's going on. And anyway, I got a bit obsessed with it. It was really fascinating to me. And I got more and more into what hormones did, and the things that you have to do to look after them, which I hadn't been doing. And of course, my dad was the one who told me that, all the things I should be doing. And actually within a few weeks of taking on his advice, I felt so much better. The brain fog lifted, the energy came back, my mood lifted, everything started to work. I felt like I'd come back to how I was before. And that was just within a few weeks of taking on a few simple things, really. It was nothing too complicated. And I thought, wow, this is incredible. Every woman needs to know this stuff. And eventually I gave up my corporate role, went back to college, studied nutrition and hormones for 4 years. And back in 2014, created the business now to really help other women who were struggling and didn't really know either what was going on. And back when I started Happy Hormones, it was 2014. And, again, perimenopause wasn't the thing. And it was really educating women on what that transition meant, what was happening to our hormones, and really crucially, how to look after them so that we didn't suffer too much going through menopause.
Love that. It's amazing. It's amazing for so many reasons. One of the main reasons I wanted you on here to start with for us to have this conversation is because, of course, we focus mainly on men, but 50% of the population is women. A lot of men that we work with will be married to or know or partner with women, and we go through almost identical things. You listed out your symptoms then, and I was going tick, tick, tick. These are the symptoms, of course, that men have as well. When we go through the same type of hormonal changes, it just happens in a slightly different way. The words you used, though, I was like, wow, yeah, that was me, that was me, that was me a decade ago. And of course, it was your dad that diagnosed me a decade ago. And, you know, and in the very same way, he said, well, yeah, obviously, we'll do some blood tests. You know, it sounds like your thyroid's not working, your testosterone is low. Can you prove it? You know, I was a little skeptical, probably. You know, I was a bit like, oh yeah, you're just trying to sell me something. You're a private doctor.
Yeah.
Prove it with the blood tests, and then, as you say, then made some simple adjustments, diet, lifestyle, supplementation, medication. Just felt like a new person. But yeah, what I love from what you just said there are there's so many parallels to what men and women go through. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to delving into it in a bit more detail today. So we're giving all of the gentlemen watching this some extra knowledge and information to help their loved ones and the people in their lives.
Absolutely. And you mentioned being skeptical. Imagine how skeptical I was. I was his daughter, so I didn't really believe anything he said.
Yeah, absolutely. But you know, he went on and changed both of our lives and even shaped our businesses, I guess.
Absolutely. He's still my inspiration today, and you know, he's going to be 80 in April. So
what a wonderful, wonderful chap. So I guess let's get into, we've just identified there are an awful lot of parallels. Brain fog, lethargy, emotional problems, psychological issues, problems with sleep, putting weight on, stubborn belly fat. You know, all of these things are very, very common in both. But what are the differences?
Yeah, so I'll probably start with the fact that men are, I mean, you're talking about sort of a potentially gradual, like lowering of testosterone. And that can kind of happen at any age, can't it? It's not really reliant on your fertility or your, you don't have cycles like us women do. So that's the main difference, in that as women, we have a monthly cycle, whereas men have a sort of 24-hour cycle of hormone release. And when we have a monthly cycle, we're obviously releasing the right hormones over the month, enable us to ovulate and then conceive, because that's what our bodies are designed to do. But when we get to our mid-30s, what happens is our egg reserve starts to dwindle. We don't have as many healthy eggs, so we won't ovulate as regularly as we used to. So we're used to ovulating every single month. And as we have less healthy eggs, we will skip various ovulations. And what happens then is that sort of triggers the perimenopause transition phase, running up to final menopause, which is when your periods actually stop. So we don't have a monthly cycle anymore as such. So what happens when that happens is that it triggers hormone decline and fluctuation. And one of the first hormones that is affected is progesterone, because that only gets released when you ovulate. So if you're not ovulating for 1 month, say, then you won't produce any progesterone, or very little progesterone, and that starts to the levels overall from your mid-30s onwards start to plummet. And progesterone is your kind of pro-sleep hormone, it's your anti-anxiety hormone, it's your feel-good kind of hormone. So that can trigger things like more anxiety when you go through perimenopause, and sleep issues, amongst other things. So we've got progesterone declining. On the other side, we've got estrogen, which is normally in your fertile years, is very estrogen, progesterone, a lovely, nice ratio between them. As progesterone plummets, estrogen then starts to go on a bit of a roller coaster throughout perimenopause. And the two things together can result in very uncomfortable symptoms: the hot flushes, the tiredness, the brain fog, the memory loss, the weight gain, the joint pain. I mean, the list goes on and on. Dry skin, dryness everywhere. The list goes on in terms of symptoms. There's 35, 40 odd recognized symptoms. So it's this kind of estrogen progesterone imbalance, and it's over the length of time as our monthly cycle starts to end, that can cause the issues. And I think for a lot of women, it can be very dramatic, that roller coaster. And we want to really get off that roller coaster, but sometimes we just can't. And I think I'm talking generally, because I know men can suffer a lot with the low testosterone, but generally for women, it's quite dramatic. The symptoms can be very dramatic and very debilitating in terms of, general day-to-day life, because you're on this roller coaster, which also means that you're going to feel slightly differently every day. We get these mood swings where we want to cry one minute and laugh our heads off the next minute, and there's all of the in between that goes with that. So you've heard of the menopause rage. That's very, very real and common. And so I think it's a similar hormonal issue, but it's different in etiology and variation potentially, and durability as well, because it lasts such a long time if you don't address it.
Yeah, but with men, it's such we can end up in the same place. How we get there is different, which is probably one of the reasons why there are the differences between how it's diagnosed. So in women, as you say, it can be quite abrupt, it can be quite changed, there can be quite an obvious change, whereas in men it's so slow. We gradually get used to it until eventually we're having the mood swings and all of the symptoms you've said, but we just think we're getting old.
Yes.
What's really fascinating though is sort of when you're drilling down into the physiology and what's going on inside. So I hadn't realized that. So as you miss ovulation, you then don't release progesterone. So do you not ovulate because the progesterone is changing, or does the progesterone change after you don't ovulate?
To be honest, I don't exactly know, but I think from what I've read and what I know so far of progesterone, there's a physiological process where it's produced when after the egg is released. So that would suggest that if you're not releasing that egg, then progesterone doesn't get a chance to be released. I mean, there is some production in the adrenals, but it's very low compared to what's produced after you ovulate. So this is where we can get those symptoms of very low progesterone.
Got you.
We also get low testosterone as well, because that disappears too, because women need testosterone as well.
And
that can get very low too. But I think one of the other differences as well is that estrogen has such an impact on our other hormones as well, and generally age-related things. I know testosterone does too, but our bones, our brains, our heart, and the way we feel is so intrinsically related to how much estrogen we have. So again, there's that aspect of it too.
Yeah, definitely. And I know we're focused obviously on the female cycle, but can't not mention that for many years men have tried to squash estrogen. In the gyms, the guys down there are taking too much testosterone. They're like, estrogen's bad, it's a female hormone. But as you said, it's not. It's across both genders, and indeed, it's so important. It's such a protective hormone. It protects our brains. It protects our bones. It's essential that we have it in the right levels. I'm imagining like the sort of ovulation now. Sort of like you've got like a supply of them, and then all of a sudden there's a faulty one. And it doesn't drop, or it doesn't do what it's supposed to do, and then all of a sudden the progesterone goes, well, I'm not going to make any now. And then like onto the next one. Maybe it happens, maybe it doesn't. And that's kind of what triggers this perimenopause.
It is exactly that. Yeah.
You kind of, I guess in some ways, it's a slow, steady decline, but you're going in one direction. But I guess with what you're describing, it can go up and down month to month. So is it going to happen? Is it not? What's happening with progesterone? So it must be harder to manage in many ways.
It can be. It's not just the ovulation skipping. There's other stuff going on as well. Your estrogen is naturally declining, and also it's a lot to do with stress, as everything is as well. Because the more stressed the body is, as we go through menopause, the body is trying to switch from your ovary production of estrogen to your adrenals, as you prepare for post-menopause, because that's where the body wants to release it from your adrenals. And if you're overly stressed and your adrenals are already struggling to keep up with your daily stressful life, then that's not going to happen as it should. So it just means that then there's less estrogen now. We do have fat cells that produce estrogen as well, which kind of complicates things a little bit. But if you haven't got that fat cell storage, then again, and you're stressed. So we're talking about, the slim women who haven't got a lot of fat on them, but very stressed as well. They can suffer even more because there's less reserves for estrogen production. So there's a lot of factors that add into not just the ovulation piece. And of course, all your other hormones can impact that as well. So thyroid particularly, about thyroid, but low thyroid affects your monthly cycle. It affects that whole reproductive system working because it supplies the energy for it, right? So if that whole system hasn't got enough energy, that's going to have another impact. So, and of course, women are more susceptible to thyroid issues as well. We've got insulin as well, another key hormone for this, blood sugar balance and insulin regulation. We are more insulin resistant as we go through this journey because estrogen and insulin have a very close relationship, as does stress. You put the three in the mix, and then suddenly, you're not very good at regulating your blood sugar, your inflammation goes up. That affects your reproductive cycle and how you get through menopause. So there's all these things, and then we're not even talking about the environment and what the extra estrogenic or foreign estrogen, chemical estrogens can do to you as well. So there's a lot of factors that are combining during this phase, plus the fact that we're actually getting older and things aren't working quite as they used to, and all of that. And also there's a whole gut element too. Gut health is where, we may not be absorbing our nutrients as well as we used to be. So then, of course, then hormones are then nutrient deprived. And we need nutrients for hormones to work. We need them to be produced, to be transported, stored, eliminated. They need nutrients for all of those processes, as well as making energy in the body. So if our nutrients aren't being absorbed, even if we're on the best diet in the world, that's going to have an impact too. So there's all these things kind of combining to trip us up.
We're complex creatures, I think, is the underlying tone to this. So when somebody comes to you, how do you go about assessing them, diagnosing them? How do you help them?
Well, we don't diagnose because we're not medical, but we definitely are all about assessment. And tests worked so well for me. When I got my hormones tested, there's no amount of words that would have told me to start managing my stress or having a look at that. And seeing it on paper was the thing that changed it for me. And knowing that, actually what he said is actually true because I can see the numbers, So yeah. I have been a massive proponent of testing ever since because it really does take out a lot of the guesswork. Someone can come to us, a woman can come to us and say, I've got all these symptoms. Now, I often talk about your feisty four hormones, which I've written about in my book: cortisol, insulin, thyroid, and estrogen, progesterone. So we've got all the sex hormones kind of count as one in that four. And I know we've covered some of them and how they work together. But completely forgotten what I was going to say. What was I talking about?
Were you going to tell us all about your book?
Oh yeah, okay. So I was talking about testing, wasn't I? So
how important it was.
I know. Yeah. So yeah, I'm a massive proponent of testing. It's the thing that really convinced me to change my behaviors around diet, lifestyle, and supplements, because it's no matter my dad telling me to manage my stress. When I could see it on paper, it's going to be so much more convincing. So we are massive proponents of testing, proper testing, stuff that you can't get on the NHS, because the NHS are really interested in whether you're dying or not. And if you're seriously unwell, they don't have the resources to be able to kind of get you to optimum health or try and prevent things from happening. And we use the functional medicine protocols and systems of looking at people. And that generally means just looking for the root cause of things. Why are your symptoms happening? And, we've talked a little bit about symptoms. And, I talk about the feisty four hormones, which I write about in my book: cortisol, insulin, thyroid, and estrogen and progesterone. And some of the symptoms of these being out of balance can really mirror each other. They can cross over. So when somebody comes to see us and she might have fatigue or brain fog or low energy or mood swings, I'm going to look at that and go, well, it could be cortisol, it could be thyroid, it could be blood sugar, it could be sex hormones. So I don't know for sure. I can guess, but testing takes out the guesswork and actually gets us very, very quickly to the root cause. So I can go in and test her hormones, all of those 4 hormones, and look at, okay, it's not that, it's this. This is the main thing. Or she's got these 2 and they're impacting each other, and let's go and really focus on that. So when I got tested, my cortisol was pretty flatline. So I knew that I had to focus on my stress, because that was the main hormone that was driving everything else. It was driving my symptoms. It was driving my low estrogen levels. And, even though I was going through peri, the cortisol issue was making that 10 times worse. So I knew that that was my starting place. So that's what we do. And it might be different for everybody. So we might be looking at somebody coming in with all the classic symptoms of menopause, and she's got a low thyroid going on, which is really similar. Poor sleep, low energy, weight gain, dry skin. They are classic symptoms of low thyroid, anxiety, depression, all that stuff. So you can think that might be menopause, but actually by testing, we can go, actually, it's your thyroid. You may not be classically low enough to get treatment, but we can get in and then support your thyroid with certain nutrients, find out if it's autoimmune related, and then we can look at the gut, because that's where autoimmune conditions are coming from, and get your thyroid kind of working better for you. And that may mean that you might not need to go on medication. So that's what we love to do, and it makes such a difference. It really speeds everything up, and it really enables us to really personalize that protocol, rather than say, yeah, go on this diet or that diet or take this supplement, when we're really sort of guessing.
Yeah. And then you mentioned some of the things you might suggest there. So supplements, diet. Do you get quite specific with that? Is it you need to do this, at the autoimmune protocol? That was what your dad put.
Yes.
Or do you just say, avoid processed food? Right? How specific are you?
I wish it was as simple as that, right? And there is no one size fits all diet. We know that. I'd be very rich if I could come up with a menopause diet, wouldn't I? That works for everybody. But there are some key principles. We want to be looking at your blood sugar. We want to make sure that that's balanced. If we start there in terms of diet, we fix 60-70%. Generally of what's going on, because that blood sugar is so key, not only to how you feel on a day-to-day basis, because if you're on that blood sugar roller coaster and you're having those dips all the time, you're going to feel really tired, really foggy, really moody, hangry, sleepy, not performing as well as you should, bad sleep, because that's what can wake you up at 3 a.m. as well, that blood sugar dip.
Yeah.
But also you're going to be in fat storing mode all day long, because you're on that. It's a very stressful thing to be on that blood sugar roller coaster, and it's messing with your estrogen, and it's causing inflammation. 2 of the things we really want to try and avoid to get through that menopause journey without too much trouble. So we start with blood sugar, because that's so key. Once we've got that, we can start to then look at different foods and, obviously focus on nutrients, get those vegetables in, key sorts of vegetables and lots of different varieties, because that not only gives you fiber for your hormones and your digestion, but it also feeds those gut bacteria as well. So there's a it's not rocket science, but it can be very, very personal to you in terms of what you need to be putting on your plate, and what particularly for you that you need to be very careful of. We never ban anything. We don't have any depriving things unless you're very ill. If you have a very an autoimmune condition that we think we can we help you with, then there are some things that you might want to cut out of your diet. For instance, things like Hashimoto's, which is your low thyroid autoimmune condition, is very much linked to gluten. So we want to be looking at taking gluten out and seeing if your symptoms improve. It's kind of just a experiment. But generally, we don't want to deprive you, because we want this to be. We try and design something that's forever, not just a very strict diet. But sometimes you do need to get the body back into balance by just doing something quite strict for a short period of time, and then bringing that back, or creating a more sustainable kind of eating plan.
Yeah, that makes sense. So how quickly do people normally see improvements once they start making changes to their life?
Yeah, quite quick generally, because hormones are very reactive. They're not something that, they get produced every day. So if you do make changes that are working and that are the right changes, they can get into balance very quickly. We all also are big fans of HRT as well, the body identical form of HRT, which is now freely available on the NHS. So if you're using that, that's great. But like I said to a lot of women who come to us, say, oh, I'm on HRT and I'm still feeling blah. Well, I said, that's because you're replacing estrogen and progesterone, but what about all these other hormones that we talk about? Let's have a look at those and see what might be sabotaging that, because HRT will only ever reproduce 2 or 3 hormones if you're lucky. We've got 100 of them running around the body, so it's not a magic pill.
Yeah, exactly. I guess we say the same with testosterone. It is incredibly transformational, or it can be, but it's not going to outstrip a destructive diet or poor lifestyle choices.
Or a stressed individual that can't, that with cortisol running around like crazy, you can only go so far.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's not magic, is it? HRT for men or women isn't going to be a stressful job where you eat pizza and sit on the sofa every night.
Or you're not sleeping,
Yeah.
All bets are off if you're not sleeping. You're not going to feel good, whatever happens, whatever pill you're taking.
Yeah. And how long is perimenopause? Like, is it a defined period, or is it different for everybody? Go on.
I mean, it's different for everyone, depending on your symptoms. So I classify perimenopause really as from your mid-30s onwards if you're having a regular cycle, right? And then the average age for your final period is around 51, 52 in the UK. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of like a 17-year transitional period, which is quite long. But for some women, they may not feel any symptoms at all until their mid-40s, late 40s, sometimes even early 50s. So it'll just depend on the woman herself, but the physiology is still happening. So, and of course, you've got the early menopauses as well. So the ones who've had surgical or medical treatment related early menopause. But I'm talking like the general woman who's got a cycle going in. So yeah, it can be a really long time. But there's a variation in duration, but there's also a variation in intensity of symptoms, because some women will sail through this period with no symptoms whatsoever, and you meet the odd one and she'll say, I had no trouble at all, and I'm like, wow, you are in the minority for sure. And it's thought sort of 80% women will have symptoms and 20% will be the lucky few that get through, but that doesn't mean they're healthy on the inside. So that's again where I say, well, okay, you feel all right, let's just see where your hormones are after menopause. Let's see where they've landed, because that you may feel fine and then your hormones might be sitting at quite a low level, and that's not great for preventing disease. So again, we want to be using these tests as preventative measures as well, and say, okay, well, you feel all right, you've got no symptoms, but we may need to just bump you up a little bit, because that's going to be a bit more protective as you get older.
Yeah, we want people to be in optimal health, don't we? Not just getting by at normal levels of health, mediocrity, if you like. Yeah, exactly. You want to be in the best possible health you can be to have a long, healthy life. You
absolutely do. Yeah, and that's what really makes me quite cross about the NHS testing ranges and the fact that they're so enormous. Particularly, thyroid is one of the most obvious. You're in the normal range if you're in the 95% average bracket of thyroid, and that's just crazy, because I've had lots of women sitting down at the bottom of normal where their doctors have said they're fine, and what are you worried about? And they're absolutely on the floor with fatigue and weight gain and anxiety, and it's just not taken seriously because they're not low enough. They're not in the really low levels to feel absolutely dreadful. They still feel dreadful, but they're not low enough to get treatment according to the normal reference range, which is just crazy.
Yeah, makes no sense, does it? It's like an arbitrary number that's been decided over time, granted through samples of data, but it's so then specific. At 5.1 you're fine, you're normal, but at 4.9 we better do something.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Really? Well, what about doing something with 7 or 10 or whatever we're measuring, to stop it becoming a problem? But
And that's the problem with these ranges. And I think, and all too often they are taken very strictly. There is no flexibility in that, and I'm not sure why that is, but maybe there's some rules around it. I'm sure, but it's very frustrating for a lot of people who really are suffering, and they're being told they're fine.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess this must have been the motivation, one, to obviously launch your business, but also then to write your book, Happy, with the Feisty 4 that you mentioned a moment ago, Happy Hormones for Life, and the book is called, I've forgotten.
Called, I have to get it up here because it's quite a long title and you might not remember. It's not you, it's your hormones. It was actually written in 2017, but I updated it last year because, of course, so much changes, particularly around the HRT situation. So it's all up to date. And I wrote the book because I was seeing clients one-to-one. And, of course, that costs money. We're in the private sector. And a lot of women I couldn't reach they just couldn't afford to work with me one-to-one. And I didn't have any other way of getting them help. So I thought, if I write the book, it's what, 11, 12 quid on Amazon. It's just got everything you need in it to kind of have some tools to get you started. It's not going to test you, but it's going to have the general principles that we all need to know, okay, what's happening and how can I look after my hormones the best I can. And there are obviously general principles around that you can do. And I go into how you can look after all of those 4 that I mentioned, and some really simple and practical tips with recipes and stuff. So hopefully it's helpful.
Oh, brilliant. That sounds great. We'll make sure there's a link on this page somewhere so people can link to Amazon and get one of those books. And you're writing your second, I think, at the moment.
I am. No, it's out there public. I've got to finish it, haven't I? Yeah.
This is a topic.
This book, well, the first book was about me and women in general in their 40s going through perimenopause. Now I'm past that now. I'm out the other side, and I'm in my 50s, and the landscape is different now. It's not about changing hormones. I'm quite balanced in that area now. The challenges now are different. They're about aging and how to protect your brain and your heart and reduce inflammation and all those things that can predispose us to chronic health conditions later on. And the statistics are absolutely terrifying if you look at them. So, I really want women to have as many tools as possible for this stage of life now. And also, it's not just about health. It's about, our mental health as well. How do we stay happy in this period? And for women particularly, it's a real opportunity to grab life and really do what we want to for once, because a lot of women the kids have left maybe, or they are, maybe they've lost, they don't have to care for parents anymore. And it's a period of life that for many women that they can feel a bit lost, as in, what do I do now? But I want it to be a really positive stage of life where, we can actually, many women have just spent their lives caring for other people. This is a time that we can actually do what we want to do with our lives for a change. And, to do that and to enjoy that extra, however many, 30 odd years, hopefully life expectancy in the 80s now is a big chunk of life that we can enjoy now, but only if we're healthy. So that's the thing, that health will stop us having that enjoyment. And that's what I really don't want to happen for a lot of women. So I've written the book to really look at how do we stay healthy beyond menopause and live as long as we possibly can with a good quality of life.
That's a really powerful message. I love that, Nikki. Thanks for sharing, and we'll look forward to that book coming out in the new year at some point.
Yeah. We're going to go right into that.
So if we go sort of back a step now, so I'm imagining, there's gentlemen watching this, and what should they look out for in their partners or in their friends, their wives? So what are there some key symptoms that generally start first? What are the early warning signs, if you like?
Yeah, I think in your mid to late 30s, early 40s, I think fatigue is a big thing, and we often put that down to work, stress, juggling, all the stuff we have to do. And there is an element to that, but it can be the first sign of changing hormones. The other big thing that men might notice perhaps first more than women is the mood changes, is the irritability, short-tempered. Almost a lot of women say they feel like their personality changes, and they're not as, patient, they're not as tolerant, they're not as, I guess, forgiving, or, they're just that the mood is quite erratic. And this can happen very quickly, like I said, or it can happen over time and just be more generic. But it's that those two things are probably the fatigue and the mood swings can be the first things to notice. And lower sex drive, dry itchy skin, the wrinkles, not in terms of aesthetics, but just the dry skin generally, and weight gain that you can't control anymore, generally feeling lower motivation, lower confidence levels. These are, there's a ton of different symptoms, but these are the things that you might start to notice in the women around you. Brain fog as well. I know that's a big thing. I know men suffer from that too, but I do know that women tend to be more stressed during midlife. They've got a lot more plates to juggle. I'm not talking about you, Ross. I know you've got a lot to juggle too, but there's a lot going on. We're meant to have it all and do it all, aren't we? And that can have an impact on this whole journey as well, especially in the 40s, where we might be reaching a certain level of responsibility at work, or we might have young kids or older kids. The clash with the adolescent thing with puberty is a common one. We're going through peri as they're going through puberty, and that's not a good mix.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's been fantastic, Nikki. I really enjoyed learning a bit more about perimenopause, menopause, and what you do. If anyone is watching this and thinking, I need to get hold of Nikki, I need Nikki in my life, how do they find you?
I'm at happyhormonesforlife.com. We've got a ton of free stuff on there. I've got a free guide if you're going through peri. We've got a quiz on there. I've got a free masterclass as well that you can watch and tick off your own symptoms to kind of work out which one might be causing your issues. Obviously, it's not diagnostic, but you can get an idea from it. So there's tons of free stuff on there. There's links to the book on there. There's I do an online course as well. And if you're interested in the testing thing, you just click contact and come through to us, and we'll send you more information on that.
Wonderful. Nikki, well, it's been an absolute pleasure. I shall let you get on with your day and finishing that book.
I'm not straight to do it now. Thank you so much, Ross.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to the Alphagenix Podcast. Make sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss next week's episode. For more resources on Alphagenix and men's health, visit alphagenix.co.uk. Until next time.